Good morning, Thrive Together friends. It's Megan Darrow, the Executive Director of Together and host of Thrive Together. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm super excited about today's episode. I think it's very timely since my kids started school today. Little shout out to Nathan and Matthew. Nathan's going into 7th grade and Matthew's going into 5th. And I'm so glad to have them out of my house for parts of the day. It's been an interesting summer as a working parent. So today we're going to talk about one of my favorite programs at Together, Clubhouse. And I have co-hosts today, Kyra and Kahlo, who are the co-directors of Clubhouse. And we're going to focus today on how we can continue to empower youth in today's world and support their mental and emotional well-being. We have an amazing guest who I call my friend and who has been a great coach to me as a parent, Emily McMason. And I won't steal her thunder. She'll get to tell us all about herself. We're also going to focus on how Clubhouse is building community as an act of resistance in our program to support mental and emotional well-being, and also how Clubhouse is focusing on our value of educational equity. So I'm going to just get started and pass it over to Kyra, who's going to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kyra Gomez-Garcia. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Clubhouse Program Director, and I oversee the 4 sites. Kahlo?
Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Kahlo. I use she and they pronouns, and I'm one of the Clubhouse co-directors for Together. I specifically focus on just finding experiences for our youth to live and experience in our programs. And that includes a lot of language and culture components. But back to Kyra. So Kyra, can you tell us more about like Clubhouse as a program so that folks can really understand what it is our awesome staff does with the students?
Absolutely. I mentioned we are at 4 sites. We have 2 elementary, Lydia Hawk and Pleasant Glade Elementary, and 2 middle, Chinook and Nisqually Middle School. At those 4 sites, we work closely with principals and counselors and school admin to provide educational equity to the kiddos that need us the most. What that looks like is offering a lot of academic support, which our kids need. It could be, interactive enrichment activities. It can be just plain old fun, right? Resources for youth and for families. And like you mentioned, Kahlo, lots of experiences.
Yeah. What would you say is something that Clubhouse does for our youth specifically and our families specifically?
What is something that they do?
What we do, yeah. What Clubhouse does.
Well, we do a lot of pieces. We are this connection right between the school buildings and the families.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that's a difficult relationship, right? There's a lot of moving pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're working with the youth, we look at the whole youth, right? Not just their academics, right? Not just their grades, but what's contributing to those grades, right? Like, how do they learn? Like, how does their brain process information, and how can we support that? We focus on SEL, which, the entire point of SEL isn't to be touchy-feeling. It's to, help build resiliency and grit, right?
For those that just might not know, what can you tell us what SEL is?
Absolutely. SEL stands for social emotional learning.
Yeah. For also just folks that are interested in knowing more about like our Clubhouse calendar, what do we follow? Just a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, we start this school year, October 3rd, mark your calendars. And we follow the North Thurston Public School planning calendar as closely as we can, right? Weather always kind of comes in and interrupts things. And then for our summer program, That's a 6-week program. For any Clubhouse parents or anybody interested, our Clubhouse calendar is posted on our website, watogether.org. And they can also reach out to any Clubhouse leadership for that calendar.
Can people sign up to like volunteer and like work and applications for the youth?
Absolutely. So we love volunteers. Also on the website, there is all of our contact information. If anybody wants to reach out to any Clubhouse leadership, we would be so happy to further that process.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you telling everybody that since you lead that. But yeah, so back to you, Megan, with your question.
Yeah. I was also going to say for middle school youth, we are before school. And for elementary school, we're after school. And then the summer runs 5 to 6 weeks of programming. And what I'll say, I don't volunteer, but I do get to visit. And it is pretty fun playing dodgeball with those middle schoolers and kickball with the middle schoolers. And we do a lot of really fun hands-on projects in both programs. I got to do bubble painting one day. That was super fun. I was not very good at it, but the kids were kind to me anyway. So, Kyra, I have a question. What are some of the biggest needs of Clubhouse right now in this year?
Yeah, I can think of 3 just right off the bat. One I would say is continued partnerships. We work closely with several local organizations to provide all sorts of different activities for our youth. But one thing I'm hoping for right in this new school year is to continue that and to further that. I think that kiddos need to see right their community in action, and they need to be present right in what's happening, so that they feel like this is their home, right? Like they can contribute and they're cared for. I'm thinking local businesses, somebody maybe even hosting a family event would be just amazing. One thing that we've learned this past school year in summer is that feeding kiddos is expensive.
Yes,
It's very
is.
expensive.
Yes.
And so snack donations or donations for snacks would help so much, would help program so much. In addition to that, I would say continuously building community with families. And I'm so excited to talk to Emily more about this, but families are going through a lot, as we all know. And I think, right, the first steps is like understanding all the pieces that go into that. And then how do we fit in with, right, the resources we can provide to fill those needs.
I love it. Yeah, I'm just going to put a pin in snacks. We do really need snacks, both for elementary, and those middle schoolers need that second breakfast, I mean, that's an important part of our morning program. Those kids come to program, and they may have a first breakfast, but they're ready for second breakfast by the end of
And for the elementary kids, too, after school, they are just ready to eat. And
especially
sometimes
early releases.
And during early
Oh my
releases,
gosh.
our staff is usually there around 11:50 to set up, and so the kids are with us till 5 p.m. We need
Sometimes
some
6.
food, and they're growing so fast.
Yeah.
So
And Kyra, can you give a couple shout outs to some of those partners you were talking about?
Yes. Right down the street, we have Puget Sound Estuarium. They're fantastic. They offer a lot of different activities. We've walked down to the pier and have dropped in robots to see the species, right, that we have here in our waters.
the kids got to dissect a shark, a tiny
a
shark.
shark.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, catfish,
Like,
all
still hearing
sorts of
about
things.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. They're amazing. PSE is amazing. Hacky Farms,
Hacky Farmers, yeah.
Hacky Farmers Collective. They're also local, and they're amazing. Kalo, you can maybe talk more about what they do for our families.
Yeah, we have an amazing partnership with Hacky Farmers Collective. This last spring, we really collaborated with them. They are able to provide fresh produce from not just their garden, but also other parts of Washington that's donating fresh produce to them. So because of that, Together and Hacky Farms came together, and we donated like about 70 to 100 food bags with fresh produce to our clubhouse families every other week.
So cool.
So that was amazing, especially with inflation and all these things that, buying organic food is so expensive. So being able to give fresh produce, it was a great gift from them.
Another important piece of that is that all of the farmers are Black and brown, and the food is culturally relevant, right? So before families receive any food, they fill out a survey about their culture and what kind of foods they're really missing and wanting, and spices, and so they work closely with each family to provide what exactly they need, which is really great. Yeah.
And they provide some lessons. Sometimes they'll come to our schools and they'll actually teach them about seeds and
And harvesting.
harvesting, all that
Yeah.
good
Yeah,
stuff.
they're fantastic.
Lost
and then
skills.
lastly, I'll say the Bridge Music Project. They're also fantastic. Or maybe not lastly, I'll also plug in the Olympia Family Theater. Just really amazing partnerships that we want to continue and further and develop more partnerships so that we all work together.
So awesome. Yeah, I was at program at Lydia Hawk when we were dyeing fabric with Mercy from Hockey Farms. And we were using vegetable dye, which was super fun. The kids were super into it.
Yeah.
She also captured some little roly-polies to keep some of the little kids occupied. Or was that you?
No,
one of you.
that was-
I was
one
there.
of you did that.
That was, I don't know,
Pulling
but I
bugs
remember
in.
that. I remember that.
Yeah, little kids who were like trying to corral their little roly-polies on their desk. It gave me the creeps, but I was there for it, and
They enjoyed it.
They did enjoy it. All right. Well, I'm going to pull Emily into the conversation now. Emily is one of our partners as well. So we invited Emily McMason here to talk about how we are leaning into our social emotional development aspects of supporting young people and to really learn more about what youth and families are struggling with, what you're hearing on the street, what you're hearing on your amazing couch, and in your trainings, especially for elementary and middle school youth. And what I'll say about Emily is in my corner. I have gone to her over the years parenting my 2 children. And she runs a business called Evolving Parents, and she's a parent advocate and a parent coach, and also a parent herself and a beloved community member. So I'm so excited to have you talking with us today. So Emily, will you introduce yourself further for us?
That felt like a great introduction. I'm not really sure what else to say. Thank you very much for asking me to be a part of today. I really appreciate it.
Heck yeah. So, well, if I did a pretty good job, then I'll just jump right on in for the first question. So, what are some of the main concerns you are seeing and hearing from parents and educators that students, elementary and middle school in particular, are facing today?
It's a great question. And I think that so much of the coverage during COVID was about what was happening academically for kiddos, that part of what now we're seeing is what happened socially and emotionally for kiddos. And it was this time of incredible, massive cultural upheaval that parents had never walked through before. And so when we're in an uncertain situation, we have a lot of fear and unknowns. And we have a hard time regulating ourselves during that process. Our kids are right there watching us struggle, and that actually amplifies their struggle. And so they had a lot of worry and concern and didn't know quite what to do with that. And so helping them learn those self-regulatory skills as they re-enter into school systems, as they, playing on the playground is a great example. You have to do a lot of self-regulation when you're playing dodgeball. Yeah. And if those skills didn't get taught for a couple of years, or if you're just walking through the day at that amped level all the time, it makes dodgeball really hard to learn how to do.
Yeah. I can relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to jump in. I love what you're saying, Emily. I think when it comes to youth and that period, right, of COVID, they had so much growing to do, right, so quickly. And I think what we're seeing is like growing pains right now. It's like they had to jump into all this growth spurt. I'm seeing too a lot of worries and awareness and anxiety around the planet, right? And like humanity, and kiddos blame adults, for what's going on in the world. And that's a conversation that I hear a lot coming from kiddos, that they're upset. There's also, of course, kiddos sometimes feeling that they don't have a voice, or they have little right to say and collaborate to the bigger, world community. And I think that that's a really important piece. Bullying, right? Academic success, harassment, right? All of these pieces. I'd like to ask you, what are some areas around maybe sleep and stress and, right, that the world of being sucked into your phone, right, or technology, how do you see that contributing to all the pieces that are happening now, and what would you maybe say to parents about that?
It's a great question. And how well and how much we sleep absolutely informs how we walk through our entire day. Sleep is this silent thermostat on our self-regulation. And so we think of sleep as kind of this passive thing that we're doing, maybe we get enough, maybe we don't, it's not a big deal. It actually dictates our behavior all day long. So we really want kids to be getting enough sleep. The younger years, we want between 10 and 13 hours of sleep. The later elementary and middle school years, we want between, 9 to 11 hours of sleep. Our high schoolers need 8 to 10 hours of sleep, and some of them are getting half that. Yeah. For adults, we need to be getting 7 to 9 uninterrupted hours of sleep.
Wow.
I feel called
And then
out.
some.
And then some, yeah.
I feel called out. That's fine.
Screens absolutely impact that. Our eyes start in the morning. They need that sunlight. As the day goes on, our eyes actually get more sensitive to light. So the more we're using screens towards the evening hours, the more greatly it impacts our ability to fall asleep and stay asleep at night. So we want to reduce that screen use. It makes a difference. I think in terms of, you brought up some really important things. The climate, social injustice, all of those pieces, it is overwhelming to kids. And oftentimes the message they get is, we're so excited for the next generation to take this on, which frankly is, I think to kids feels like a cop-out. It's like we're saying, like, we don't have the answers here, you get to solve it. And we're the ones with the life experience. We're the ones with the wisdom who should be stepping in to help them. We should be modeling how to solve hard problems. I think one of the biggest things we can give them is their own emotional vocabulary. If you look at all of these stressors in your life and it feels like this is wrong, that's terrible, that's overwhelming, that's on fire, it's hard to figure out what to do. If you can look at it and say, I feel distrust there, I feel scared there, I feel overwhelmed there, and I feel confused there, then we're naming emotions. We can take that in, we can sit with those feelings, we can watch them float by, then we can jump in and take action. So that we're kind of taking off what locks us in place. When we can name our emotions, then we can get to the problem solving. But if we don't name how we feel, if we don't recognize that, then the emotions stand in the way of making change.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd like to sort of intervene here and almost like pivot a little bit into a different direction of social and emotional learning. We had a brief conversation yesterday, Emily, and in this conversation, you gave a very amazing example that helped me see it. I'm a visual learner, so I was able to visualize what you were talking about. And it had to do with, what are the challenges after COVID and during COVID, right? We were talking about that, and you said something along the lines of like, we didn't realize that we need to co-heal. If you could please take it away with not only the reference that you made, but also like how you finished that, because I think it would help people visualize our emotional need and dependency on one another, but it's not toxic or unhealthy, right? This is a different kind of dependency.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Absolutely. And just jump in if I'm not saying what I mentioned yesterday.
I think anything you say will be great.
So one of the things that happens with newborns, so empathy comes in 4 stages. And the first stage is something we're born with. And newborns, mammals of any kind, will respond this way. So if if you're holding a newborn and you're upset, they're going to become upset. They're reading our body language, especially that whole first year of life before language has come into place. Their whole assessment of am I safe or not safe has to do with our body language. The same is true for any mammal. If you see a herd of deer, if the front deer gets startled, they're going to sit up. Deer number, 14 in the back is going to do the exact same thing. Their ears are going to come up, their tail's going to come up. They don't know what startled the first deer. They just know they need to be on alert. The same is true of our kids. They're reading our body language all of the time. It's actually a stronger indicator to them than our actual language is. And so one of the things that happened during COVID is that we were walking around totally stressed all of the time. That put our kids on that high alert all of the time. So in terms of co-healing, what we want to be able to do is have those conversations about naming what's going on. We've never lived through a pandemic before of this scale. I don't know what comes next. I'm learning how to do this. Being able to say to kids, I don't know, and we're going to find out together, or I don't know, let's do some research, or let's imagine, or let's try things, so that they can see what being a problem solver looks like. We're naming it out loud for ourselves, so we're doing that healing for ourselves. And then we're also modeling it for our kids. And so it's got this feedback loop. And so that we're healing with them. We are also, though, having more life experience, more wisdom. And so while we're healing with them, we're still leading them in that process. So we're not dependent on them. We're kind of guiding them through it as we go.
Yeah. And you connected that to a reference of 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, when we think about September 11th, there was huge national impact, international impact from it. And that was a single day. And we are still tracking what the impact of that all these years later. I have a friend of mine who works in the Olympia School District, and when the kiddos who were born right after 9/11 here in Washington State hit 6th grade, she and her colleagues noticed that there was a difference in developmentally with those kids compared to the kids a year older. And they realized these were the kids who were newborns when that took place, and that their parents were so dysregulated by that day that it impacted how those kids were growing social and emotionally. That was one day. We have now lived through, 2.5 years of the impact of COVID. And so if you take that one day effect and magnify it, 500 times, almost 1,000 times now, it has an enormous impact on all of us in that sense.
Yeah. Thank you for speaking on that. I'm going to pass it over to Megan. And I appreciate that whole reference because I think it helps people really connect the dots of like the impact that the pandemic has made. And now we have, a new term, right? Pandemic babies.
Yep.
So we are going to see what that looks like here in the next couple,
And for our early kids in elementary school, they were home and being taught that being around people is a dangerous and scary thing. And rightfully so, right? In those early days. But to reteach them that interacting with other human beings is actually necessary. We need to belong. It's going to be an interesting journey.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to ask Kyra to talk a little bit about social emotional learning and, taking Emily's conversation here into context into how Clubhouse is using social emotional learning and youth program quality and our PQA tool to, help build this community and have this community healing for youth in Clubhouse.
Or to simply start having these conversations, right?
Yeah.
I think having these conversations and these, addressing these topics with youth is one thing. And then with families, it's a whole other thing, which I feel like is another whole conversation, Emily. One of the pieces that you had mentioned was around validating emotions and giving those specific words in that, terminology, vocabulary. Another piece that we see that connecting is that cultivating empathy, right? And not just saying this is what empathy is, but this is how you can achieve, right, empathy and the stages of empathy like you're talking about, right? That could be as simple as, oh no, right, you're going to trip. Can I tie your shoe, right? Which we've seen and it's, been oh, so heartwarming to see that. Or just, young people taking other people, not even their friends, right? But just other people into consideration before they say something, right? Before they wail their arms around, right? Which is maybe seems like a small victory, but it's huge when, you have 60 kids running around after school and they still take a moment to say, my action is going to hurt somebody else. That's a big winning moment. Another piece that we connected in is fostering growth mindset. So when a student has a success, a win, right, they nailed a presentation, we attach that win to hard work, right? To, attention to detail, right? It's not like, oh, great job, right? It's like, your hard work is really paying off, right?
Yeah, it's that process over product.
Exactly. And I think understanding that as a youth is big, right? Understanding, especially in our middle schoolers going into high school, we really tell them, the healthy habits that you create right now around just your life, but your academics as well, will follow you, right? And through high school and through, college or beyond. And so I'm really excited to continue the conversation. But our SEL PQA tool, we use it as a self-assessment tool, right? So all Clubhouse leadership and app program sites, they use the tool and score themselves off of observations. And we also have an external evaluator that comes into programs and looks at program quality following an SEL lens, right? So how do team members speak to youth? How do youth speak to other youth, right? What is the climate? Is it positive, right? Is there negative language? Like what's going on, right? And we use all of those pieces to really look at SEL as a whole.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, really building that community and program around social emotional learning, research and concepts, I think is the way to support youth in this healing.
Absolutely.
Through whatever stage pandemic we're in now. That's not what this podcast is about. So, Emily, I have a question, and I've heard you talk about this with me before, but what is parenting bravely?
So to me, parenting bravely is, there's sort of an acronym that I've come up with for it. So the B of bravely is to breathe. And I think that this is actually the very first part of parenting bravely, is taking that pause to set aside the cultural messages we got as kids or the way we were parented as kids and stepping into best practices. So the B is for breathe. The R is for respond instead of react. The A is for attitude, which is actually the way that I figured out how to get sleep wedged into the word bravely, because our attitude gets so changed by how we sleep and whether we're getting enough sleep. The V is for values, and it's really about finding as a family 4 or 5 core beliefs that you want to hold as the center of your family. We tend to spend a lot of time saying things to kids like, don't chew with your mouth open, right? Or don't talk with your mouth full. We don't spend as much time saying like, hey, one of our core family values is kindness or responsibility or education or, whatever that piece is. The E is for emotions, feelings, which goes to the conversation about naming our emotions and the impact of that. There's really interesting longitudinal studies about our behavior when we name our emotions. The L is for love. What does unconditional love look like? How do we embrace a child for who they are, not judge them, and use healthy boundaries for them? And the Y is for you. Oftentimes in parenthood, we place ourselves last, and that isn't good modeling for our kids. It's not healthy for us, and it erodes the family. And so putting ourselves back into the equation.
Great.
Yeah.
I could see that. Clubhouse bravely, right?
Yeah.
Clubhouse bravely. I like that.
Yeah, well, I saw Kyra taking notes over there. So.
I am. I love all these pieces. I think the the breath, the very first one, just breathe,
Made me-
right? It just, it made me
was like,
want to
okay,
take
I'll
a
take a
deep
breath.
breath. I was like, whoa, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's true. We carry around like all this heaviness.
Right.
Absolutely. And that's that moment where we pause. And if we can take that inhale and then the slow exhale, there's great research about, people talk about box breathing, but what I talk to kids about is trapezoid breathing, right? So the trapezoid's got one long leg to it. We want to inhale, hold, and then you want your exhale to be longer than any other piece of it. That's what re-regulates our central nervous system. So if we can pause, take that breath, then we can respond instead of react to a child.
Right.
That changes everything.
Yeah.
Because then we're not going toe to toe with a kid, we're standing shoulder to shoulder. If we're going toe to toe with a kiddo, we're trying to win our point.
Right.
That means we actually want them to lose,
Yeah, that's adultism.
right? And what we want to do is shift so that we're shoulder to shoulder because we want to guide them so that they grow. And all of that starts with that breath.
Something that I talked with a facilitator of ours over the summer was like just practicing meditation
Yeah.
with their group. And she did. And I wanted to know the outcome, right? Because meditation is something that even it's hard for adults, right? Especially with there so much going on. But starting at an earlier age, especially she had like a little bit of the younger kiddos, maybe can build some sort of habit. So I just wanted to see how it worked. And the results that I received were like, they were able to just, when I asked them to take a deep breath, and it was that like, they were starting to like get up there with their energy. And she asked them, hey, take a deep breath. They were more connected with her communication at that moment, with that bridge of like, right, let me do this, right? Like, so that to me just shows that also like helping regulate emotions can come from something like meditating, learning breath work. Breath work is extremely important. I recently started that as a 30-year-old. And I'm like, wow, imagine if I would have had this, or I would have known this, that would have controlled a lot of how I felt about the world at many points in my life. But going into more of like the community that we do serve, I spoke a little bit about this with you yesterday's. Kyra and I have a very special job in the sense that we both come from Latinx families. We both identify as female, and we have attended college and graduated, right? So now in our jobs and in our career, we have the job of translation, right? How do we translate newfound knowledge and newfound awareness and translate that, interpret that for the communities that we serve, being a pivot point, like a triangle, right? And to me, all this information sounds amazing, something that we can definitely work on and take forward. But I can say that I wouldn't expect many of the families that we do serve to be able to like go and seek therapy or go talk to someone about parenting bravely, right? So I guess the question I'm really coming around to is like, how can we support our communities to parent bravely when time is a conflict, right? That's one of the biggest ones is time. Language is a barrier. And there are a lot of resources out there. But once again, with time as a conflict and language as a barrier, how can we support them in parenting bravely? And I would like for you to, apart from your answer, also talk about fear, because that's something that you mentioned about why fear lives in our community and why it's hard to adjust and adapt and continue to grow.
Yeah.
So if you could just maybe talk a little bit of how we can support parenting bravely in our communities that we serve, and maybe other people can take that information forward in their communities.
Yeah. And I think part of it, I was thinking about what you said about the farms, and that each bag of food is tailored to the family that's going to receive it. That one of the most critical things we can do is do that code switching or language shift. And so that what we're saying is in alignment with the person who's hearing us. I think that oftentimes we feel like any kind of change, we have to like dump information at people really fast and get it all in right away. And what we really want to do is break it down into these just individual bite sizes. And so if it's even, sending something home once a week, once a month with 3 sentences for families, so that it's not a huge change that we're trying to make, that we're just saying like, hey, try this one little thing. And I think it's also tying together idea and action. That it's one thing to say like, okay, theoretically, here's, all this great research and here's what it can do. But if we don't say to people, here's how to do it, here's how to try it at breakfast tomorrow morning, it can't take hold. So I think that those are some of the critical pieces along the way. And, it's an interesting thing because fear is often what gets in the way of us making change. But from an evolutionary perspective, we needed fear to survive as a species. The Buddha is said that we have 4 fears in life. One of them is change. And if you think about it, it makes sense. If you were in a family or a tribe that lived on a savanna and you came across a cliff for the very first time, if you didn't have fear, if you were not hesitant around change, you'd walk right over the edge of that cliff. You'd be like, oh, this looks cool. I wonder what? And down you go, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the end of your family line. But if you have fear, if you are hesitant around change, you're going to approach that cliffside from a distance and kind of peer over the edge and go, yeah, I don't think that's such a good idea. And you're going to back up, right? So we're hardwired to be afraid of change. We are hardwired for fear to really stop us in our tracks. And we're not facing a lot of physical cliffs anymore. We're facing more emotional cliffs. Mm. But now that we know that, we can say like, okay, this is fear. I get it. I acknowledge it. And I'm going to set it aside so that it isn't driving my response to something.
Thank you for your answer. Mm-hmm. Speaking of bite-sized pieces, what is one thing that we can do as educators, mentors, parents, students, right? Each individually. What is one thing that we can do to forward healing and supporting youth?
Okay, I have 8,000 answers in my head. What's one thing?
Ooh, I knew that was going to happen.
Not judging people. I think oftentimes when we see someone behave differently than we behave or behave differently than we think they should be behaving, we label it, we're dismissive of it, we assume malintent in it. And I think especially with our kids when youth are struggling or having a hard time, they may lash out. And there's an assumption that lashing out is deliberate. And I think if we can take that pause and say, wow, they're struggling right now in this moment. How can I help them here? And compassionately step into relationship with them. I think that that's one of the biggest ways we can make a difference. So when a kid is wiggling or yells at somebody else or slams a door, instead of being punitive towards them, coming at it from the frame of like, they need help right now in this moment. How can I help them? And coming at it with curiosity instead of judgment.
Yeah, that's great. Similar, I mean, you're talking about it more in like an emotional context, but we've had conversations with our middle schoolers about ethnocentrism, right? And how like not everybody has to fit your cultural, shape, whatever shape you are, right? And some people will never fit that mold because they have one of their very own, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that that's a fear-based response, right? Their assumption that everyone should be like them because that would put them at ease instead of saying, oh, there is difference and that's for me to learn about, not to ask that person to educate me, but that's for me to learn about so that I am at ease with everyone instead of making everyone same as me so that I'm at ease.
Right. Right. Uncomfortability is good.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that we see with the parents that we do serve is they don't they don't know how to prepare themselves to open up to a world unknown to them.
Yeah.
Based on culture, based on maybe religion, based on like how and where they grew up. Thinking about it from the perspective of, oh, I have felt this before. This is fear. This is nerves. This is uncomfortability. What can I do about it to help myself become more self-aware, right? Rather than how can I tell this person who identifies as X, Y, and Z that that's not okay.
Yeah.
And it's shifting that perspective of like, why do I feel uncomfortable when someone's identifying as such?
Yeah.
Or coming from that perspective, right? And it's like more like going internal. Emotional cliffs. I like that.
I know. I like that too. Emotional cliffs. All right. Well, we're coming towards the end of our time. So I'm going to ask you a question that I ask every guest, which is, what does building community as an act of resistance mean to you?
I think that it is through building community that that's the only way for us to create systemic change. And so creating such a good question. And I should have thought of this ahead of time.
I like the off the cuff.
Yeah. I really believe that it is only through community that we create the change we need to see, that it is one to another, to another, to another.
Coffee on the couch.
Coffee on the couch.
That's how we'll change the world.
Yep.
Yeah. Great. So, Kyra, we have some calls to action for our audience.
Yes, we do. The first call to action is to involve youth, right? Ask youth, engage with youth, right? Let youth voice come through, and youth know what youth need the most.
Yes.
And really involve them in the conversation, right? Oftentimes we want to say that adults know best, right? But youth know a lot more than what we give them credit for, and so we need to expand that, right? And further their learning along by letting them lead and talk and be a part of the conversation. And that ties in with our other call to action, is that adults need to work hard to remove the idea that they know best, right? The idea that they know only, right, what should happen. And I mentioned adultism right beforehand, but I think a part of that is adult readiness, right? And what that is being prepared for whatever comes next, right? Not having a plan and not living in this fear of the unknown, but really being ready with maybe your steps, maybe how you feel internally, maybe parenting bravely, so that adults are ready to take on whatever's coming. And I would say another call, right, that comes into that is to continue learning as an adult, but to also be interested in curiosity and to further curiosity and to allow curiosity to be in their homes, right, in their community. Adults, do better. That's the call to action. Do better.
Yeah.
Do better.
And snacks.
And snacks, yeah.
Second breakfast snacks. Awesome. So I want to give a couple shout outs. One to North Thurston Public Schools. They're a major partner for us. They have been hosting us in their schools now. I think we're going into our 8th year of Clubhouse.
8 years.
Yeah. Whoop, whoop. And then North Thurston Education Foundation, Mike Jones over there and their board, who help us fund Clubhouse, needs of parents, direct needs of parents, and also some snacks. And then the City of Lacey, who's been a longtime partner and funder of Clubhouse. I just really want to give a shout out. And of course, thank you all for joining me this morning at Thrive Together, Coffee on the Couch. Emily, thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like I just got a whole coaching session. I'm going to take Parenting Bravely home. I'll probably write it up on the whiteboard. And of course, Kyra and Kahlo for everything you all do every day to create amazing community for youth and families in Clubhouse. Really awesome. And for co-hosting.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
I love spending time with y'all.
Yeah.
And then special shout out to Meg Sullivan and to the Porcupine crew who are behind the cameras
Woo.
with the easy job, not having to talk on camera. All right. Well, we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.